The AMA actually doesn't use the term artificial intelligence. They use the term augmented intelligence. And I've given talks to physicians about AI. And one of the most common questions I get is, is AI going to take my job?
That's Dr. John Scott, a professor of allergy and infectious disease at the University of Washington Medical School and medical director of the Harborview Liver Clinic. Dr. Scott also is the chief digital health officer for Medicine. In today's conversation, Dr. Scott shares his experiences and perspective on the risks and value of AI in medical research and care settings. And we also explore the potential impact on healthcare professionals, improvements in patient outcomes, and the fundamental changes to the medical profession that are likely to result from AI. I also get the chance to hear more about the Nobel Prize recently awarded to a University of Washington professor for discoveries he made with assistance from Google DeepMind, their AI research laboratory. You won't want to miss this episode of The Digital Clinic. Tell me a little bit about your background and the work that you do at the University of Washington.
Yeah, Aaron. So I came up to the University of Washington in 2002. Came up from the Bay Area, where I grew up and where I completed my internal medicine training at Stanford. And I came up to do my fellowship in infectious diseases and kind of followed a traditional path of academia. After graduating from my fellowship, got an NIH grant and was on that pathway of academia and in research scientist pathway. And then around 2008, kind of had a little bit of an epiphany. So I'm interested in hepatitis C. And the treatment at that time was very toxic. It was a combination of medications called interferon and ribavirin. And very few people would treat the condition because it was so toxic. So I had patients driving from all over Washington to see me. And I was very concerned about their safety driving home just because the treatment was like chemotherapy. And I was like, there's got to be a better way of doing this. And that's when I came across the Project ECHO program. So ECHO stands for Extension for Community Health Outcomes. Was started in 2004 at the University of New Mexico. And it's a telementoring program. It was one of those things I heard about it and I said, I want to try this. And so Dr. Sanjeev Arora, who started the program, said, well, let's write a grant and see if we can expand it to another state. And we were very fortunate that Robert Wood Johnson Foundation funded us. And it was just one of the funnest things that I had done and also was really helping a lot of people. So the program is really built on the case conference model, which is how we're trained in medicine. So a classic thing that we would do is we'd stay up all night admitting patients and the next morning have to present those cases to our colleagues and then also more senior doctors. So we don't make people stay up all night for ECHO, but we do ask them to bring kind of their toughest cases to a multi-specialty panel. And so that kind of got me on the pathway of telemedicine. The next step was I did a sabbatical in Australia in 2011, 2012 at the University of Queensland, and really saw how the Australians have tackled the problems of distance and bringing knowledge to the people. That was great to kind of learn from that. And when I came back, the University of Washington said, I think this telemedicine thing might be important, and asked me to be the first medical director. So I started in that position in 2013 and slowly grew the program. One of the key parts of the program was just kind of having a unified strategy and plan, kind of consolidating our contracting and our technology, and then really working with our legislature to change some of the laws. We were fortunate to have several members of the legislature that really understood how important this was going to be. And so we were in really good shape when COVID hit. We had a lot of good training programs, had a lot of our processes set up. And I think compared to a lot of other states, we had a good infrastructure and allowed us to pivot pretty quickly. And of course, that really grew our program quite a bit. We had to go from, having about 200 providers who were doing telemedicine regularly to over 4,000 in just a couple of weeks.
Oh my God.
So it was a very busy time, but we were able to do that. So we kind of hit a peak of 35,000 telemedicine visits in May of 2020. And, for the most part, worked really well. Along the way, though, we realized that the whole patient journey often starts with an internet search, going to Google. If you have an ailment or something like that. And we really wanted to come alongside patients digitally and help them to kind of understand their condition better, and if appropriate, to book an appointment. So around 2 years ago, we rebranded from telehealth to digital health, and we took on this portfolio of what we call the digital front door.
Right.
And so that has been a new area that we're exploring. It does include things like marketing, but also just kind of understanding how patients want to navigate. We have a philosophy: there's no wrong front door. Trying to meet them where their the most important criteria is for selecting a physician.
Yeah.
So it's been quite a journey. It's been a lot of fun. We have a great team, and now AI is kind of changing the calculus quite a bit.
And along the way, you became Chief Digital Health Officer.
That's correct. When we rebranded in 2022, I went from being the medical director for telehealth to Chief Digital Health Officer. Yeah, so we have a team of about 15 to 20 people. We have the dyad model, and so I have a great dyad partner who helps with a lot of the strategy and HR and business planning.
Can you explain a dyad model?
So the dyad model is basically linking a physician leader with an administrative leader. I think Mayo Clinic is probably the best example of that, and that's something that we employ quite a bit at UW Medicine.
Yeah. So you and I have been corresponding and talking about AI, and it's the focus of this series. Can you tell me a little bit about how AI has enabled and impacted your work?
Wow. I mean, it's impacted quite a bit. And it's something I've had to educate myself quite a bit on. So I'm on the guideline committee for the Washington State Medical Association and also on the AG task force for AI. But I think that the first use case at UW Medicine that we've employed for AI is really trying to make sure that our workforce is not burning out, because COVID really did a number on the workforce, from the physicians to nurses to all the support staff. So the first two deployments have really been aimed at trying to help physicians with some of those non-physician activities, like number one being charting. We talk about this metric of pajama time. Through our EMR, we can see when people are active on the EMR, and surprisingly, there's a lot of people doing activity around 10 o'clock when they should be in their pajamas and thinking about bedtime. And so one of our first deployments will be using ambient listening. And instead of the physician typing away at the computer, they're actually just going to be talking to the patient, and the technology will then be writing that note. Then they'll have to go back afterwards and clean it up and edit it. But at least at other initial deployments around the country, it's really saved a lot of time, and I think led to much better work satisfaction for physicians. So we're excited about that. The other thing that has gone live was inboxes. So the MyChart messages, great way to stay in touch with your physician, but that has exploded too with the pandemic. I think every patient can say that it's been harder to get in to see any kind of physician.
Right.
So they've really relied on that, but our inbox messages have just exploded. And so we are doing a pilot looking at using ChatGPT to do the initial draft again. So there never is going to be a time where no human ever touches any kind of interaction, but the physician needs to, see the first draft and clean it up and check it for accuracy. And I think the first drafts, pilots are going well. I think that what we've learned is it may not save any time, but I think it adds higher complexity. And it's also leading to, strangely enough, adding to more empathic responses.
Sure.
So I think that's kind of an interesting finding as well.
Yeah. So one of the things that people worry about with AI is hallucination.
Yep.
And even in the past week, I've read stories about AI being used for charting or note-taking during patient visits, and that at times information is captured that wasn't actually present in the conversation. How do you protect against that?
Yeah, I think, just like anything else, you have to read the note. And, and when we talk about this in the kind of discussion about adapting this technology, we say, well, we have a lot of notes that are written by medical students, they're written by residents or fellows, and they might be hallucinating, or they might be have made something up or copy forward. So I don't think that there's an expectation that even with humans, charting, that it's 100% accurate. So it's the same as before. You need to read the whole note and check for accuracy and for inconsistencies.
Is there work that you do or your teams do to specifically configure the LLMs that you use or to build them out in a specific and constrained environment so that the behavior is different than others might experience with ChatGPT?
I think we're using kind of the out of the box ChatGPT. It will be trained on our data though.
Sure.
So it's specific to UW Medicine, and we're working primarily in these initial forays with large established companies. So Microsoft and
Sure.
who acquired Nuance. And then for our ambient listening, we've gone with a company out of Pittsburgh called Abridge. So we're really excited about that opportunity.
So there are a couple of sort of categorical ways that AI is impacting. One is certainly in the patient experience. The other is in research. Recently, a researcher at the University of Washington won a Nobel Prize for his discoveries around protein folding and protein design in combination with DeepMind out of Google. So sort of a combined AI human Nobel Prize. I know that isn't work that you do yourself, but can you give us a sense for that partnership and also the implications of protein design, which seem pretty profound on a global level?
Yeah. So I think you're talking about Dr. David Baker,
Yeah.
who has a great local story. His parents were professors at the University of Washington. He went to Garfield High School and is a professor here. So he runs the Institute for Protein Design. And proteins are kind of the building blocks of life. So they control the things like signaling, self-signaling. They're very important in like hormone function and things like that. They would be a key part of any kind of your immune response, so monoclonal antibodies, things like that. So super important. And what he did is he had a computer program, an AI program, and he was basically designing proteins that didn't exist naturally in nature. So that had never been done before, and so they can kind of say, hey, this is a need here, and for me as an infectious disease doctor, it's really exciting for drug discovery. So as some folks may know, there's a growing problem of antibiotic resistance or antimicrobial. You can talk about malaria resistance, things like that. And there's not a lot of investment from pharma, unfortunately, just because there's often not a lot of money in it. Usually you're talking about 1 or 2 weeks of therapy. So it's kind of a race. We're always kind of feeling like we're just one step ahead of the bacteria and viruses and things like that. And so it's led to discovery of whole new classes of antibiotics. So probably the most famous one is a compound called halicin. It came out of the MIT labs. And so I'm really excited about that. It's also shortened the whole drug discovery process. So before it was a lot of working in Petri dishes and testing against a whole library. But now the initial discovery is in silico, looking at the three-dimensional structure of that protein and how maybe another compound could fit in there. That's usually what's happening when we're talking about antivirals or antibiotic compounds. So I'm really excited about that opportunity. The other opportunity in research is just trying to match patients with clinical trials. So before I got into this area of telehealth and digital health, I ran a large clinical trials program. And it was really dependent on me, like kind of remembering, this patient might qualify, or putting up flyers. And so it was kind of just, frankly, a haphazard process. But what we can do with AI is we can put in the criteria for the clinical trial and then search in our database and say, hey, these patients would meet the criteria. And then, of course, we would go out and contact them and go through the whole informed consent process. But it's going to allow for a much more efficient process of matching patients to clinical trials. So the first step in the process is just asking if patients would ever be interested in clinical trials. Some people would like to say, I know, I just don't want to do that. And we can put that on the chart. We'll never contact them.
Right.
So
yeah,
I'm really excited about that.
When we think about discoveries that are enabled by or maybe powered by AI, again, one of the things that people fear who don't know a lot about AI is that AI will discover something make a recommendation that isn't possible for a human being to have arrived at least in a particular time frame. How are those discoveries or recommendations then vetted or checked before a new drug, a new discovery comes in contact with patients?
Yeah. So, for example, if let's go back to discovering new antibiotics. The first step in the process is testing in animals. So you do all the safety first in animals, and then there's a first in man study. Those are phase 1 studies. I've done a number of those, and those patients are often in the hospital and observed very carefully.
Yeah.
So I think it's the same process. It's just doing a much more efficient vetting on the front end. And as we learn, we can say, hey, this compound we should not use because it has it's been known to have a side effect. And so hopefully we can screen those out even better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I right in recalling that one of the early COVID vaccines was an AI-enabled discovery as well at the University of Washington? Or am I misremembering?
There was a group that did use AI to predict a structure, and I think it was licensed somewhere in Asia.
Yeah.
But by the time they had made the discovery and everything, we already had the mRNA vaccines and the Novavax vaccine. So
Interesting.
yeah, but I mean, it was good proof of concept for, knock on wood, the next pandemic. We're probably going to have another outbreak of some virus. That's what we're probably thinking of, virus.
Yeah. You mentioned creating a digital front door, and that the notion is there is no wrong front door. How, if at all, do you envision AI facilitating that digital front door?
I think that it's taking a conversational chatbot, and I think that chatbots sometimes get a bad reputation because up until now have been very algorithmic, but an AI can be very flexible. Currently, if you were to try to see a specialist at UW Medicine, we ask you to first identify what kind of specialty you want to go into. And sometimes it's not really apparent. Let's take the example of, say you have a chronic cough. Is that a lung condition and you see a pulmonary doctor, or is it ENT, something wrong with your throat? And so that's where like a conversational chatbot can maybe help to get you to the right specialty. It also allows us to understand what's most important to you. Do you want to see only a provider of a certain gender, or they take certain insurance, or they speak a language other than English, or they're close to public transportation? Whatever's most important to you, that gets surfaced, and we can really prioritize that in matching you to the most appropriate provider.
And it's also important for folks to understand that in a medical context, a chatbot can be trained on and constrained to only the information that is provided by the provider.
That's correct.
Yeah. Do you also see implications for AI in virtual care, in telehealth, for example, for Echo?
Echo is a program that works best because of the relationships. I've been doing this now for 15 years, and over time, these become your friends all over the state. And so I think technology in general works best when it's kind of goes to the background and allows that relationship to really to go smoothly and have the just a really seamless interaction there. So I don't want to put the technology in the middle of that relationship, but I do think there's some opportunities for Echo. The first of all is there's just a lot of information we cover. So several of the echoes we record are didactics. We usually start a session with a kind of an update on maybe a new topic or a kind of an essential thing that people need to know about. It's 15 minutes usually. Now we've given thousands of hours of those didactics, and it might be really great for the participants to be able to say, hey, Dr. Scott was talking about this particular condition, and they could use the chatbot to search the recorded didactic, and it would play that 1 to 2 minute clip. And oh yeah, that's what he said. So I think that, AI does a really good job finding technology and summarizing it and bringing it to the user. So I think I can see that. And also just kind of the back office stuff, tracking CME and things like that, and just making our team more efficient.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say for Project Echo. For telemedicine, I think there's some real opportunities to use best evidence for patients. So let's say you're staffing a telemedicine visit, and it's an urgent care, and they have symptoms of sinusitis. Well, the AI could be listening to the interaction and saying, "Hey, these are the guidelines from the Infectious Disease Society of America, and also the guidelines from ENT." So it can really help you to practice evidence-based care, and also be a good steward of antibiotics, good steward of testing.
Right.
And then lastly is just providing education back to the patients. So one of the things we're really excited about A-Bridge is it can provide a specific after visit summary, summarizes the conversation, pulls in information from Up to Date, which is a great resource that we use. And then patients can have information they can refer back to. So I think it's really important that patients are educated on their conditions, and I think AI can really help to that. And
you mentioned that AI in the context of inbox management or even charting has surprisingly resulted in maybe more empathetic responses.
Yep.
How do you envision that AI might change the role of a physician and what's important in a physician-patient relationship?
Yeah, that's a really great question. The AMA actually doesn't use the term artificial intelligence. They use the term augmented intelligence. And I've given talks to physicians about AI. And one of the most common questions I get is AI going to take my job?
Right.
And so there's a famous quote from one of the past presidents of the AMA who said, AI is not going to replace doctors, but doctors that use AI are going to replace those that don't.
We say exactly the same thing in digital marketing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I encourage my colleagues to play around with it and to see how it can make you more efficient. That's kind of the crux of the matter, is trying to be more efficient and also trying to provide safer, more high value care to our patients.
In digital marketing, and I can speak for myself personally, there's a sense that value delivered is derived from time and effort, that there is a work component that's required to feel that you've delivered value. I know that the life of a doctor is very rigorous and arduous. AI might make it less arduous. How do you think it might change the nature of work and what it feels like to be a physician?
Boy, I really hope it takes us back to the good old days where we used to write a couple of lines and the doctor actually was looking at the patient and truly being 100% present. That's my hope and dream for AI. And I think it can do that, while also helping us to be, safer and more evidence driven.
So a higher quality experience for the physician as well.
Yeah. We like to talk about upload and download time. So one of the most common complaints I hear from patients is, well, this is like the third time I've told this story. And, I think it'd be really great if, when you're preparing for an outpatient visit, the chatbot says, "Hey, why are you coming today?" And it maybe gets like that first 3 or 4 questions. And so then when you're sitting down with the provider, they can see, "Oh, I see you're coming for this, and it's been going on for this long." And so basically you're spending the majority of your time as a physician counseling them on their test results, counseling them on the options, being a little bit more of that partner in decision-making. I think that's going to be a higher value visit for patients and also for providers.
Do you or does the University of Washington have a rubric or a framework that you apply when considering where AI should or shouldn't be used?
Yeah, we have a task force for AI that kind of released their first guidelines earlier this year. And some of those principles that are included in that are, first of all, privacy. That is probably the most paramount aspect of AIs. And I think a lot of people don't appreciate how just putting a little bit of patient's information into a chatbot is like releasing it into the wider world. So that initial guidelines that do not put any protective health information into a chatbot. That was kind of a hard line there. And the second is just the importance of bias and equity. Large language models all have bias because of the data that's going in. So I think it's really important to be checking those outputs and checking your model for bias and making sure we're not widening any of the health inequities we have there. And I was just recently at the health conference in Las Vegas, where I heard executives from Microsoft talking about a tool called FairLearn, which is checking for bias. And so I hope that becomes more of the standard for these LLMs, is that there's a bias detection. It gives you a score, that kind of thing, and you can fine tune your model to reduce bias. You do take a hit on accuracy, but I think that's probably worth it. I think the third kind of principle that we're talking about is intellectual property. That's a big thing in academia, is making sure that you're citing where your sources are, and that you actually go back and say that actually the study that you're citing concluded what it is. So I review a lot of papers, manuscripts before they're being published, and I'm seeing more and more the statement, whether you used AI or not in the performance of the study and writing the manuscript. I, as a reviewer, want a lot of specificity. What exactly did you use that AI for? And a couple of times there have been some red flags. So I think that intellectual property is going to be a big thing, and just double checking that. And then just validation. There can be drift in your models.
Right.
And so there needs to be a constant kind of reevaluation of those models. So those are kind of some of the guiding principles that we're employing at UW Medicine.
You mentioned the use of AI for charting, and you've mentioned privacy here. So I think it's probably important to clarify that in the context of charting, I assume you'll be running a local LLM.
That's right. Yeah. And it doesn't get stored. The conversation doesn't get stored permanently.
Right.
Yeah. As soon as you're signing your note, that gets deleted.
Yeah. So AI can be configured in a way that protects PHI.
Correct.
And serves the.
Yeah. That was a kind of a hard stop in any kind of contract. Yeah. We needed to really vet that.
Exactly. We are similar in that we have access to PHI because we work with healthcare providers. And so all of our infrastructure has to be HIPAA compliant, and all of our data has to be handled in a very specific way, in just the same way.
I'll just tell you a question I asked one of the leaders at Microsoft last week. And my question was, what keeps you up at night when you think about AI? And he said, actually, it's the dramatic change on the workforce that it might happen from AI. And I think that goes for healthcare. There's a lot of skills that AI can probably take over.
Right.
And that's going to have profound implications. So there's a huge drive for efficiency. There's a huge drive for trying to save money. But I don't want to have that happen at the expense of people.
Yeah.
So we need to be very thoughtful about retraining those folks or showing them how the AI can make them more efficient. So that's probably the biggest concern I see for AI when it comes to healthcare that people maybe aren't thinking about. The second thing would be ROI. That's getting talked about a lot more because we have very thin margins, and this is not going to be something we're going to get for free. So what is really the value for the healthcare system, the value for the patient? I think we need to be very thoughtful about that. We started out with use cases that were really geared towards, preventing burnout, but probably is not as much of a good ROI. I think where you're going to start to see some improvements and driving down costs and improving efficiency are going to be more in the back office.
Yeah.
So like trying to make sure that our claims, when they're submitted, they get approved the first time, making sure we're coding properly. Physicians are horrible about coding accurately, even though we've been trained for hours and hours on end. It's just not something we're interested in.
So that seems to be at the pinnacle of tedious work.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We just hate that. Yeah. And we just want to, honestly, I think the average doctor just wants to be able to take care of the patient.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to see a lot more pivot towards that back office operation, and then more on kind of case management, making sure that those patients don't fall through the cracks. And then the third area is in the area of population health. So there are going to be insights from AI that are going to have profound implications on the health of a population. Let me give you an example of that. So there was a study recently that looked at chest X-rays being used for predicting valvular heart disease, also predicting diabetes, and it's surprisingly good. So chest X-ray is the most common radiological procedure, and just so the audience knows, that's not usually how you diagnose diabetes or diagnose valvular heart disease, but it's really accurate. So it might be a tip-off to say, hey, we need to do some follow-up testing and confirm this. So it's an insight that can only happen when you have huge databases and you're taking overlapping databases and then helping to guide targeted interventions. It's something that Dr. Eric Topol has called machine eyes.
Yeah.
And I think that's super exciting area. And again, it's going to drive outcomes at scale. So I think that's something we're just exploring.
I think that's been some of the most interesting reporting on the use of AI in medicine. Impacts on quality of care and those stories where AI has been able to provide early identification of certain cancers better than radiologists can.
Right.
What sort of, you mentioned chest X-rays, what sort of other circumstances have you seen where AI is improving quality of care?
AI does really well in imaging having heavy specialties. So like radiology, pathology, ophthalmology, dermatology. And I think what it does is it helps to counteract the effects of fatigue. So if you look at the quality of a radiologist's performance, it goes down during the course of the day. So they're obviously better than the first couple hours of the shift, but towards the end, they miss things. So I think AI is kind of like that little man on their shoulder saying, "Hey, look over here. Yeah, there is something there." And it may not be the reason for the study, but it may be something that is very important for them. So I think that's going to be really useful. The other thing, like in pathology, is taking that image and overlaying genetic information. So let's take the example of lung cancer. So it can take that image of the biopsy, and it can say it most likely is going to have these genetic signals, and therefore you should be using these specific chemotherapeutic agents. So I think that really shortcuts the kind of the turnaround time and leads to much more targeted and effective treatment. That you're going to see a lot more of that kind of stuff.
Are there medical specific LLMs?
I know that there's a number of companies that are getting into that business. One area is what's called digital twinning. And this is technology that Epic or the large electronic medical record is starting to do. And there's other companies that are doing this. And what it does is, like, if you have a patient and maybe there's something unusual about them, or it's an unusual diagnosis, or you can't find the diagnosis, what you can do is say, hey, are there other patients in our whole corpus of EMRs that are like this patient? And so it can kind of help you say, well, yeah, there's actually 5 patients and this is what the diagnosis was, or they got this treatment and, these people did well, these people didn't. And even because Epic is all around the country, it can put you in contact with the physicians who maybe were treating that rare condition. There's another company that was spun out of Stanford called Atropo, and they're trying to use what's called small language models or medium-sized language models. So it's basically training the data only on your instance of the EMR.
Right.
Because frankly, patients are different in the Northwest than they would be, let's say, the Southeast. We have different genetic backgrounds and things like that. The other thing is they're a lot cheaper because you just don't have to do so much computation. It's more energy efficient. So I think it's a company that might be interesting to look at as well.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I think that it's ChatGPT that has come out with a new model that only uses compute for the delta, for the delta between any other historical computations or queries or exercises that you had and what you now are asking it to do. And I can imagine in a medical context that can lead to a lot of efficiency.
That's right. And I don't know if the average listener knows that that currently when you ask ChatGPT a question, it doesn't know what you'd asked before that. So it doesn't have that history. And so that's going to be really interesting to have a little bit more of that context.
What have you seen in this new world of AI that has really blown your mind, that most excites you?
Oh
Or
boy.
intrigues you, maybe is a better adjective.
I mean, I think the most practical one is just the ambient listening. And we're actually getting some really interesting insights from that. Of course, it was built to help drive efficiency and change the burden of that. But in the pilot data, there's been some analysis of that interaction between the
Mhm.
patient, and then they've gotten like surveys of patients kind of giving feedback to the provider saying, on a scale from 1 to 10, this was an 8. And then they ask questions about like, what do you think the doctor could do better? So they look at that doctor to patient interaction, and I think it can help us be more empathic, ask more open-ended questions, and frankly be better doctors. So it's actually having some of these really interesting research questions. It's going to change how we educate medical students.
Yeah.
Because frankly, once you graduate from residency, there's no one who's kind of really watching how you interact with patients. It's just, I mean, maybe if you're really bad, it's going to show up on a Google review or something like that. But I think it can. That excites me. Again, how can we be better doctors, more empathic, to connect better with our patients? I think that's going to be really interesting. In the area of surgery, I was just talking with one of my neurosurgical colleagues, and he's really excited about using what he calls AI navigation for surgery. So I think a lot of people know that there are robots, and frankly, what robots are is just taking out a lot of the tremor, and the kind of helping to be more agile with the instruments.
Yeah.
But in neurosurgery, you're operating in a really narrow field, and even though you may have a pretty good exposure or things like that, you're not seeing everything. And so what AI can do is it actually has cameras in the OR, and it has a full 360 view. It's actually using some of the technology from satellites for more accurate positioning. And it can really guide the surgeon's hands, saying, no, you need to avoid this nerve right here. And so I'm really excited to see what's going to happen in the area of surgery. Again, for faster, more accurate, safer surgeries.
That's very interesting. A few weeks ago, I spoke with Al Lindsay, who was the VP of engineering at Amazon, who developed Alexa technology. And he was describing what was required for them to cultivate ambient listening that was accurate enough. The tens and hundreds of thousands of conversations that they had to gather and how they went about doing that. It occurs to me as you're describing ambient listening that you're in a similar situation. There's a massive amount of data and tremendous diversity, particularly in a healthcare context, of what might be said. Do you know, and it seems like Amazon has probably more data on this than anyone on the planet in a longer history. Do you know if that data has been shared or is being shared?
I don't know. And I think that actually this question of data is a really important question because, the whole saying garbage in, garbage out with data. I mean, if you don't have good data to train on, you're not going to get a good model. So there's also a saying that data is like the new oil or the new gold.
Yeah.
So really having well-validated data is going to be really important. Going back to a question you asked about what am I really excited about? Where's a huge need? Actually, it's a pretty basic thing, but it's translation.
Yeah.
We have approximately 5 to 10% of our patients who do medicine that don't speak English. In my particular clinic, it's more like 50%. And so when they're on my chart, they're getting all their messages back in English. And I'm pretty sure what they're doing is either asking a relative what this says, or they're putting it in Google Translate.
Yeah.
And that's not medically approved. It's not medical grade. So I would love to see AI in the next couple of years be able to provide medical grade translation. And it's not just translation from English to another language and back. It's also translating medicalese into plain English, right? When I say otolaryngologist, I know that's a head and neck, ear, nose, and throat doctor, but the average person doesn't. Or a particular anatomical term.
Yeah.
It'd be really great if, when that is shown up in your report, you can maybe hover over it and, it takes you to an anatomical image. You're like, oh, okay, it's right there. That's where they're going to operate. And that's why it hurts there.
Yeah.
So I think that, again, equity, really important. And a foundational thing is making sure it's in language that you understand. So I'm really excited about opportunities there. Really excited to see what Dr. Carrie Lyon is doing at Seattle Children's.
Mm-hmm.
She has a pilot there looking at AI translation. And the interesting thing here, going back to data, is their pilot is with their top 4 languages, which I believe are Spanish, Mandarin, and Cantonese. It was one of the East African languages. I want to say it was Somali, and then I want to say Russian. And it turns out that the AI translation is quite good for Spanish, just because there's so much out there in Spanish, and there's a lot of Spanish translators. That's actually not where your need is. Your need is in the more minor languages. So the initial data with like Somali was the AI tool didn't do very well, just because there's not that much data to train on. It all comes back to data.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything in every discipline at this point points to data and data strategy.
That's right.
Yeah. Interesting. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate your time.
Yeah.